Okay, so welcome to the PTA Auditors Training. I am not sure how many of you might be first-time auditors or how many of you are returning auditors. If you want to just share in the chat if you are returning or new, you can just say returning or new. And that will let me know how much time that we will be spending to go into the training. Okay, so most of you are new. Okay, all right, no worries. So in answer to Jenny's question, I believe, you will get to see this recording on the PTA Council website. And it'll probably be, I think they said maybe a week or so before they're posted there, but it won't be very long. So it's always fun to start this with some comedy because people think auditor and they're like, oh, that's a hard job or it's not a fun job. But we're going to laugh and enjoy being the auditors in our chapter. And you might even end up getting a trophy when you finish because you might be the one who finds the needle in the haystack. So that's our comedy as we start. So the purpose of an audit. So the audit, and I need to share with you, this will be in the council's video, but I can also send this to you as well if you like to see it. So you determine the accuracy of the books, you find that needle in the haystack, detect all the inconsistencies or errors, you provide recommendations if you find some things to help your PTA do better, and you protect everyone because this is money that doesn't belong to us. You want to make sure that it's used the way it's supposed to be used. And so you are protecting the financial officers, which are the treasurer and the president. Anyone who signs checks are financial officers. And you verify that funds were sent through the appropriate channels. So everything that has a receipt attached or has a verification form that comes in with it. And again, making sure that the resources were managed properly. The job description is here, and I'm sure that before you volunteered, we're all volunteers to be the auditor, you read that job description and are very familiar with the job. One of the best things about being auditor is that your big job only happens twice a year. You compile or you get the treasurer's compilation of all of the financial records. And the first part of your job will happen from July 1 through December 31st. That will be the first half of the year when you will be auditing the books. And then the second half will be from January 1st through June the 30th. So on those fiscal years. And really, if you are super busy and not able to contribute to every meeting every month, being the auditor is a big deal and a way in which you can contribute that doesn't require a regular, consistent report or task. Your report will be what you do from the July 1 through December. You'll report at the January meeting. And then what you do from January to June when you review the books, you'll report at the first meeting of the next year. And even if you're only in for 1 year, your job as auditor is still to report the year that you audited. So there might be someone new coming into the position, but you finish your year. Okay. Okay, oh, just some things, special note pieces though, before we go on. You are the impartial person, so you can't be related to anyone who's a financial officer in the chapter or who has anything to do with funding, like fundraising chairs for events. And you also, there's always like 2 people who sign checks. You are never one of those signers. There's usually a couple of people who will open up the statements. You aren't that person who signs. you just look at everything at the end. So when you have an event, you oftentimes they'll say, if it's in person, we need someone to count all the cash. The auditor can never be that person. You can't be involved in those tasks. So just know to keep your boundaries. Some of the tips for success: make sure that you spend some time with the outgoing auditor, especially if your audit had any findings in it. You want to find out from the outgoing auditor what was happening and what was going on, so that you'll be abreast of what to possibly expect or what corrections to expect in the next year. Meet with the treasurer, meet with the financial secretary if you're lucky enough to have that position too, and make sure that you work together, but you don't oversee their work. You can give them reminders, things that you'll be looking for. You can give them the audit checklist so that they know things that they should be doing all year long. And when you get the books, it's going to make it easier for you, because you've started off having this conversation to work together effectively so that they know what you're expecting. And the way in which many units do it is they'll have a big binder for each semester. And those binders, the way in which they're organized, will make your life either really easy or really, really hard. If the binder is organized in a way in which you can see, for me, when I was an auditor, I like to have every month, everything, and a separator in the treasurer's binder so that I could easily find what it was. Some people like to have all the minutes together, all the bank reports together, all the receipts and voucher forms together. So it just depends on what makes it easier for you to go through it. But what you don't want is that it's not organized at all when it comes to you. So make sure that you, again, are having that conversation with your treasurer so that they can start knowing what to prepare for you. And again, be aware of last year's, or really the ones that you just are adopting this month from last year, any recommendations. So this is a schedule. We've talked a little bit about that. Again, you conduct the audit twice, and or if there's a resignation. So if someone in your unit who is a financial officer resigns, the treasurer, financial secretary, president, any check signer, an audit needs to be done just to make sure that the financial records are closed out. Mulane, help me say your name so I don't say it wrong. Mulaney. Yes, your question, please.
I have a question. Our school did not have an auditor last year.
Okay.
So there's no outgoing auditor or audit for me to refer to or discuss. How does that affect my position moving forward?
So we will need to talk offline, because you do need to have an audit. It's a requirement for your unit to operate, is to have the audit done from each year. So we'll need
then maybe I misunderstood, because when I volunteered, they're like, we still need an auditor. So maybe it was for this coming
year. Probably.
Got it. Okay. I will clarify that and then reach out to you if I need to.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
And I will be here to help you if you find that you do need to.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so the audit, again, it's conducted the one time in January. And the reason that you have to conduct the audit is technically your unit is not supposed to have any financial transactions until the audit is completed. So again, when winter break comes, that's when I would get the books from my treasurer, and it would take me, once I settled in my mind that I was going to do the audit, which is a mental thing to get settled to say I'm ready to do the audit, it would take me a full day to go through the books, go through the checklist, make sure that everything was there. But that was it. So I gave that full day sometime during the winter break and finished the report. And then when school finished in June, I would, same thing, get ready and do that full report or full day to do the audit then. And that's it. Some people it takes longer, but it depends on how if you have errors or how organized your treasurer is, it may take longer, but it was just those 2 times. So the end of the year and then the mid-year audit. And when you present the report, it's from that point when your unit can start to have financial transactions for that next time period. So they need you to finish it over the winter break. So when they come back in January, they can start writing checks again, or, spending like they would need to, or collecting receipts from fundraisers and such. I see some chats happening, and okay, thanks, Jenny. We'll miss you. Any other questions? I'll keep going then. Okay, so this is what you do to prepare. You're going to get that binder that has all of the financial records in it and other records, such as the bylaws or other documents, such as the bylaws, the standing rules, the minutes, the checkbook register. And so sometimes that you'll actually have the checkbook, and it's a long checkbook, or sometimes you will have it an electronic version, but you want all of this, and your treasurer is keeping all of this all along in a neat, organized way for you. The payment authorization forms in my unit, we have made the cash verification forms and the payment authorization forms different colors so that it's easy to see when you get the binder. All the yellows are for the cash coming in, all the blues are for the payments going out. I know that doesn't happen in every unit, but it helped in my unit when I was auditor. It made it much easier to see and go through the binder quickly. So if there are things you want to check in with your treasurer to see that they're doing, that meeting early on with them is really critical and important so that you get on the same page. And you'll need the minutes of both e-board and association meetings, because every expenditure has to be noted in the minutes. And if it's not, that's an audit finding. So there's the checklist, and I'm going to see if I can open the checklist. I can open the checklist. Can you still see my screen? Can you see the checklist, or do I need to do another share? I need to do another share. Okay, let me get to the checklist. So hopefully you can see my checklist now, or the checklist now. Give me a thumbs up if you can see the audit checklist. Okay, so this is the document that you can give your treasurer now, that you can give all of your financial officers so they know what you're looking for when you do the audit. It's good to know in advance, no surprises, so people can keep the records clean and neat. And this is what you go through with them, or not with them, but when you get your binder, this is what you'll go through to make sure that everything is there. So the top part, there'll be some records that are needed, and you just basically check them off to see what's there and what's not there. And you'll see the bank statement information. So you'll need the beginning balance records from the first bank statement of the school year. You'll need the reconciliation information. So you need all of the bank statements have to be reconciled. And you will want to, these are all if they're using the PT Easy, I think. I don't know what the software as a treasurers use, but they can print out, everything's automated. So as long as they're putting everything in, they'll print out every month these reports that will show the reconciliation. And so if you're attending the meetings every month and the treasurer's report is missing something that you know is going to come up in the audit, you can very well say, hey, just a heads up, you need to make sure that the reconciliation report is presented every month, not just the treasurer's report that's presented. Yes, this PowerPoint will be on the Santa Clarita Valley Council PTA website. And I will put this link to this document in the chat so that you have it. Your treasurer also, we heard in some of the questions earlier, the membership numbers are recorded. And this is important for audit because we have to pay the 525 to council, and we need to know how much money actually came in through membership. That should be recorded on the treasurer's report. So you'll be getting that from that document, making sure that they have the insurance, the minutes, all of the payment authorization forms that have a check number on them. They have the signatures, they have the receipts attached, any money that comes in, the income, that it shows the deposit slips that they make in the bank. One big thing, units should never have a credit card or a debit card. Everything has to happen in the bank with PTA units. And so you will actually see the deposit slips that your unit is making as a part of what you're reviewing. Financial secretary, we didn't have this position, so it wasn't something that we were dinged on. If you have that position, that's a person who is the checks and balances for the treasurer. They record everything that goes in and everything that goes out. The treasurer puts it into the automated like QuickBooks system or PTEZ. And then of course the treasurer's reports and their annual financial report that is just kind of pulling the whole year down. Any committees that are spending money, their reports need to be in here. Often they would show the committee's budgets in those. And tax forms, the units have to file their taxes every year. So these are things that other positions do, but it's important that you as an auditor help them to be aware of what they need to do so that when the audit information gets to you, you don't have to, you don't have to say, oh, you missed this. It's good to start at the beginning and keep everyone informed. And then looking at, of course, the audit report, the last one, the one that you are about to work on will become the record for the next time you do it. And it's the same with the one that you will be approving this month from the January to June time. And that's it. So I've never seen the last line, if there was mismanagement suspected, I've never seen that marked, but this is all there for you if you need to mark that. So I'm going to put in the chat the link that goes to this fillable form. And again, share it widely with folks in your unit who are going to be responsible for the audit or for helping you make sure that you have a good audit. Again, you want each box to be marked like negative, there's no issue. If there is, this is saying use red ink. You don't have to, but this is a best practice to use red ink if you find something. And some big things to look for on the ledger and check register, they want you to have the name there that says audited by and the date when you finish going through their check register, so that it's like a place where this finishes and then it's a clear place in the checkbook register where the next financial documents start. All right, so we've talked a little bit about some of this. It's hard to not talk about the whole thing at once, and the slides are divided up so that you can see what it is because it's just so many little bullets. But basically this says you want to start with the last audit, and that's always where you will fill in on your audit form the balance from before. You want to make sure that the checks that you're reviewing, and what I would do is I would make a list of all the checks that were written during that period and have like a little column that I could show what the items were that were needed, so I could check off anything that was missing. If they missed the PAF for it, or if they missed a receipt for it. These are things that will help you. And if it is, the checks didn't have like 2 signatures, if it was one time, I didn't write them a recommendation for one time. I just share with the president, please make sure. But if it's a habit, something you see consistently, those are when you will make recommendations. Then Again, verification that they can spend the money in the minutes, checking that the bank charges and interest are recorded on the treasurer's report, deposit slips are there, all of these pieces that we've talked about, the cash verification form that is used, and your treasurer will have these forms. So if you haven't ever seen them, ask your treasurer, or when you check in with your last year auditor, they may still have the books from this last year. And so you could get a quick look at what the books look like for your audit so that you could see those different forms. I don't have them. There are sort of universal ones, but some units have created their own version of those forms, and that's okay. But check with your treasurer so you can know what they look like. Are there any questions? I know I'm going fast. So are there any questions? And I'm going to show you the audit form once I finish these bullets. Okay. So again, making sure that there's 2 signatures on the checks, money deposit in a timely manner. That's important because I think it's supposed to be within 3 days, the money's supposed to be deposited. What can't happen is someone's walking around with a bunch of cash from PTA for a month. That's a red flag. And so you're going to look at when the money came in on those yellow cash verification forms and when it was deposited. We want things to happen quickly with that turnaround. Confirming the membership numbers agree with what the membership chairman report says. And all of those reports should be in writing each month so that you can see that line up with what the treasurer's report says that money came in. I'm guilty myself. I, have not always done every report in writing. So do the best that you can to have your chairs and officers do that. Okay. So this piece, membership number, should be recorded on the cash verification form. That's if you have the in-person membership and you have to manually do that. Most of us are using Totem, so that might not be a necessity. Make sure the money's forwarded. We already talked about insurance because all those things were on the checklist when we went through it. Comparing receipts and expenditures, comparing the figures, and all of these things are in the checklist. This is just a little bit more detail of what they mean. And this is a checklist that we just looked at. And this is the actual audit report. So this I will also put in the, whoops, let me go back. In the chat for you. Oh, it's not opening. So let me share a new screen and just going to share the whole thing. And then hopefully you will get to see I'll get to give you the link. I don't know why it's doing that. Love it when my tech works with me, and now it's not. So the audit report, and I'll get that to you before we finish. What we just saw and that link that's there, I'll put it in the chat, but this is an example of one that is filled out. And again, you want to start with the year that or the semester that you're covering. You want to make sure that you cover all of the check numbers that were written, and that'll be in the check register. You want to make sure that you start with the number from last year. And so if the number from the last audit was, in this case, $49,838 in the account as of December 31st, 2020, that's what you're going to start with here. And then you go through the steps of all the money that came in. And this will be a couple ways of looking at this: through your treasurer's reports, through the bank statements, through the reconciliation report. And those all should match. And when they don't match, there will be reasons why. Like in some cases, there'll be deposits that haven't been made yet, or there'll be checks that aren't cleared yet. So that's the next line, is the disbursements, which in this case is 15,412. And that should leave you with the balance on hand of 37,769. And you'll be using the check statement to see if that's what it is. You'll be using the treasurer's report and the reconciliation report to make sure those numbers match. That's the first half. I think about the audit as it comes in, it's short, but it comes in really two halves. So that first half is done once you do that. And then you do the second part of it, which is a bank reconciliation. And that is, again, where you're looking at the statements to see what's left, what hasn't actually hit the account. So you start with the balance that you had, again, as of the date that you are starting your review from. And then you look at any deposits that haven't been added there. And then you look at any checks that haven't been cleared, and you total those up. And once you reconcile that, that number that you have on the bottom, the balance in the checking account as of that 6/30 date, has to match the balance on hand from when you did your financial review of the receipts and disbursements. And that's basically it. Those numbers need to match. You'll sign on the bottom as correct or not correct. And oftentimes when it's not correct, is not because those numbers don't match. It's because that checklist is very long, and it could be something else that's missing, like the minutes, like the 2 signatures. It could be a variety of things that are causing that. So that's the audit form. And again, I'll put that link in. It's a fillable form. I'll put that link in when we finish, since I can't seem to figure out how to do it now. And then most units have multiple accounts, because one is for their electronic account, like your totem, or if you get money through Amazon or whatever the electronic deposits might be, you might have a separate account for that you need just for that purpose. And then you have your checking, and then like my unit has a savings account, because the checking account is free if we have a savings. And so we just keep $10 in there to keep it open. So you have to audit every account. And the savings accounts, the PayPal accounts, those are pretty easy because the money in the PayPal is really a pass through. So it won't be hard, but just know that you have to do all 3 of them, or all 2 of them, if whatever the case is for your unit. Okay, so common mistakes that are made. Sometimes you run into things that will cause you a headache, and you're like, what did I miss? What's going on? And you'll need someone's help and someone else's eye to look at it. One of the things that's happening now is there's audit committees. And so you will have someone who is working with you who can make sure that you don't miss some things. So here in this case, verifying that the last outstanding checks were cleared. If they were all cleared, that's great. But if you missed that they were cleared, that'll mess you up. If there are still outstanding checks, kind of the opposite of that, and you don't include them in the reconciliation, that'll mess you up. If there are outstanding checks for over a year, sometimes people, because we're volunteers, they do something for PTA, they submit a receipt for it at the moment because they do. But then like 6 months later, they're like, I'm just going to give that to the school and not cash that check. Well, that messes up your financial records. And so you need to void out that, and you need to make a note of it so that it doesn't stay on your books forever. So that could be an issue. You calculate the disbursements without including any of the checks that cleared since the last audit. So summer's kind of funny. This set of books covers from January to June, to the end of June, and then some checks come in July and August, and somehow the treasurer's report starts when school starts, and so they miss what might have happened in July or early August. Those are some mistakes that could happen. The checklist we've gone through. So one thing here that I want to highlight is differences of opinion to the process shouldn't result in a recommendation if the records are correct. And sometimes, again, your treasurers might do things a certain way, and it doesn't seem like it's quite the right way to do it, but they do it and it works fine for them. It's their system. As long as the records come out right, the financials come out right, that's fine. And you don't need to write a recommendation that says you should do it this way. It's only if something is wrong that you'll write that recommendation. When you mark it as correct, then it's just correct. But if there are recommendations of any type, then you want to choose substantially correct, partially correct, or in the worst case scenario, it's incorrect. If it's incorrect, you'll be involving me, and I'll be involving probably the district auditor, because it's a big deal if it's incorrect. Substantially correct is pretty frequent, and that might mean you have 3 recommendations. Make sure everybody signs the checks. Every check has 2 signatures. Make sure that your minutes reflect the expenditures. Make sure that you get your insurance information or whatever it might be. So those would be things that you'll mark as substantially correct. If it's more than that, but it's not, it's still correct, like your audit still comes out matching the numbers, but you have maybe a half dozen issues that they missed on things that they should have, then you'll write that in as partially correct. But if your audit numbers don't match, that's incorrect, and you'll have a lot of recommendations, and you'll need to talk with me, and we'll bring in other people who can help find out what's going on. So these are what these look like. So again, correct, it's all good, nothing wrong. Substantially a couple of notes and issues. If there's more than that, partially, but the audit is still right. But if it's incorrect, again, you'll talk to us for assistance. You just can't get it to balance. All right, so here's some examples of the types of recommendations that you might have. We've talked about the checks being signed for 2, but this is cash. You can't have just one person counting the cash. And so there's a place for 2 people to sign the forms, and you need to make sure that 2 signatures are there. Authorization forms to pay a check, the secretary and the president have to sign those. Last year was obviously different because we weren't in person. So there was a lot more leeway as long as the numbers added up. And honestly, there was not a lot of expenditures happening in units last year. So folks didn't have a lot to report on. The treasurer's report didn't have a lot happening. And if there's something more than 6 months old, another example. So that's it for their overview. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, but I wanna leave my email here for a moment. If there are questions that you have, you can always reach out to me by email, and I will do my best to help you answer those. And if I need help, I'll get help from someone else who can help answer the questions that you might have. So let's see, I am putting in the chat now the audit report, and I'm going to put my email in there too. Any questions? You can unmute. I went 10 minutes over. I'm sorry. Hi, Angie.
Hi, Cherise. You know, I'm driving. I was driving, taking my son to Scout, and I lost you for a chunk of time. So I'm going to have to download your version, your recorded version later, and maybe ask you some questions. But I got the gist of it. So thank you. Good presentation.
No worries. And you see me all the time.
Yes, I do.
So no worries at all. Any
Thank
questions from anyone?
You did a good job.
Thank you.
There's no questions. That's a good thing, right?
That's a good thing. So if something does come up, you can again, I'm supposed to stop recording. See, stop recording, pause, stop. I'm going to